Hi, I'm glad you're back with us to look at this third session on Revelation. We're dealing with chapters 4 through 7 today, and we're going to really dig into the first of the visions. This will be the first time we've got the background information done, and so now this is the first time that we're digging into the 7 visions. The first things that we talked about is the fact that remembering that Revelation is a part of apocalyptic literature, and there are certain styles and certain things that would come by a piece of literature being apocalyptic. It's going to be grandiose. There's going to be symbolism. There's going to be a lot of numbers. So all of these things we're going to, when we read Revelation, we're going to take all of these things into consideration. Second of all, we looked at the numerology that's present in the book of Revelation. The first vision we encounter is the 7 seals. And so we talk about what the number 7 means. 7 means complete or perfect. So we're going to read this as almost every time you see a number in this scripture, just replace it with the word of what it really means. So you could see the number 7 and you would read that as complete. So for example, when we get to the point where we meet the Lamb and the Lamb has 7 horns on his head, a horn would be representative of power. And so we're not seeing that the Lamb actually has an actual 7 horns on his head, but that the Lamb has complete power. We would read the number 7 as the word complete. We would know, we've learned that a horn is evident of power, and so it has complete power. It also goes on to describe the Lamb as having 7 eyes, and so we would see that as having complete sight, or all the way to the ends of the earth, that the Lamb is capable of seeing everything. So in the notes, which you can find at ststephen.org/graceways, the notes will have all of that information on the numerology and the background of apocalyptic literature. The first thing that we're introduced to are the 24 elders. Now, there are 2 theories as to whom these elders represent. It's obvious that the elders are not angelic, that they are representative of humans, and that the elders are actually setting an example for us as to what worship should look like, the fact that it should be all the time. The 2 theories as to whom the elders, why the number 24, and whom the elders represent. The one theory is that there are 12 tribes of Israel in the Old Testament covenant and 12 apostles of Jesus for the New Testament covenant. And so 24 would make completeness of everyone. And there's another theory that the 24 would represent the 24 hours of the day, which is how much time we should spend, according to their witness, praising God. So it's interesting, those 2 theories as to why there are 24 elders. And we see that the elders have golden crowns on their head, which would have been a thing that the audience of this text would have been familiar with. It was not uncommon to give a crown to someone in high position of authority. But the interesting thing about the elders in our text is that they take the crowns off and they place them at the feet. They throw them down. And so it's really a call to the readers, and I would say a call to us as well, to take the positions of authority that the world has given us, that we've achieved or that have been given to us, and to cast them down, as they are not the we are still under God's authority, that we are in respect of God, and that we are placing God at a higher level than our own authority. There's some good discussion questions in the text for you to reflect upon. We next came to the 7 seals and talked about how number 7 being complete. And we also talked about how a seal would have been used to seal something so that it would only be opened by the rightful owner, and that it would also show the authority of the one who created it. So when we look later on at the people being sealed on their forehead by the mark of Christ, how that's it shows God's authority and God's power and God's claim on us, how we were ransomed, purchased with him. And some of the members made the correlation to baptism and how we make the sign of the cross on the forehead, and we say you are sealed with the cross of Christ. And that's obviously no mistake that we use that language in baptism. The text goes to look at who is worthy to open the scroll and to break the seals. And we see, we encounter Jesus. And no, Jesus is not mentioned by name, but we encounter first the lion, the powerful one, the Lion of Judah, who is from the root of David. And so we see that allusion to Jesus there. And we see how a lion would be conquering and full of God's power. And then next, right after that, it goes on to talk about the figure who's worthy as not just a lion, but also as the lamb, as embodying both. And we see that there's 4 attributes to the lamb that are in your notes that are interesting to note. The first being that the lamb is standing, that there was showing resistance. Even though we think of a lamb as a weak character, in this vision, the lamb is standing. We see that the lamb is slain. And John uses an interesting term here that's not used anywhere else in the New Testament. It's used twice in Revelation and nowhere else in the New Testament. The Greek word, forgive me, is sphazo, which means slaughter. And opposed to otherwise in the New Testament, we come across the word thuo, which would indicate sacrifice. And again, we think that John is trying to show us how in the face of persecution, the lamb was resistant and he clung to the truth even when all of these false accusations were thrown at him, how Jesus clung to the truth and was thought slaughtered. And it's such a vivid image to think of a lamb who's standing and slaughtered and bloody, and you can just imagine what that looks like. And of course, we're going to read this imagery in light of the fact last week how we talked about John's audience was dealing with persecution, and John is really giving them hope of the one who has overcome the world, also faced persecution and stood up to it. The other 2 attributes we see to the lamb, as I mentioned before, are the 7 horns, which means the complete power, and the 7 eyes, so the complete seeing. So that's whom we're introduced to, who is able to open the seals and open the scroll and break the seals on our behalf. And then as we look into these seals, the things that are released on us, first are the 4 horsemen, and there's a chart in your notes dealing with the colors and what they're about. And it's really, we had a lot of group discussion, and I asked you to reflect on why this imagery, why is it so horrifying? Pay special attention to the miscellaneous parts under your notes, and we can see why John is using some of these things. For example, the 4 horsemen being white, armed with a bow and a crown, and dealing with the purpose of conquest. Now, under the Roman Empire, there were obviously tribal people who were outside of the jurisdiction of the empire, places that had not been conquered by Rome. And those are the people that would have been using a bow. A bow and arrow would not have been the weapon of choice of anyone in the Roman Empire. And so this is really giving the readers in those 7 churches, or as we read, to all who have ears, let them hear. But it's really giving them a call to say, you know what? A society that was created through conquest can still be destroyed. And as we know, the Roman Empire does no longer exist and was eventually destroyed. And so pay special attention to, especially under the 4 horsemen, why it is that they would have come. The 5th seal personally bothered me when I read it, and looking at the martyrs of victim and persecution, and to see them crying out to God for the faithful, while these faithful are remaining to God, while everyone else is turning a blind eye. And then the 6th seal dealing with the physical, the earthly, excuse me, the earthly elements dealing with the course of God's judgment. I think the thing that we struggled the most with, and the thing that you're not going to get from your notes, the part of the discussion that was really the richest, is why on earth are these horrible visions? And we talked about how the power of a word picture versus the power of a word. So if I say, Jesus Christ died for all, which is what the lamb picture is really saying, that Jesus Christ is all powerful and all seeing, and that he was worthy to be praised because he ransomed all. If I didn't say any of that, if I just said Jesus Christ died for all, it doesn't have any of the same power that the word picture has. And so this is very common in apocalyptic literature, that you're going to see these word pictures that are going to build you up and play on your emotions to make you willing to hear the message that the author has for you. And of course, we get into that message. We're starting to see the meat of that message at the second half of Revelation 7. We see the 144,000 that are marked with the seal. And then we go on to read further that all are included in the worship, that all are actually there. More, after John spends all this time carefully giving us the numbers, the number 7, the number 144,000, which is a play on the number 12, which we discuss in the numerology section. So he's careful to give us all of these different, there's 24 elders. We know all of these numbers. And then in the end, he gets to the really good news, which is it's more than we can count. There are more people than we could even imagine, more than he could even begin to count, that are there praising and worshiping God and the Lamb. And that's who we believe is included. God spoke on behalf of all creation. And it even goes on to say of all races and of all colors and of all are included in this. And so it really can kind of, I encourage you to press through. If you're reading Revelation and you don't see the hope, keep reading, because it's there. And that's what Revelation is really, a book of hope. We talked about the ultimate topic of Revelation is that God wins. And so I encourage you to keep reading until you see that. Don't get caught up in the ugly visuals of the 4 horsemen that are so often talked about. And know that that's really an emotional play to get you ready to hear the good news that God has for everyone. I hope to see you next week. We meet in the parish hall Thursdays from 10 until 12. And next week we're going to be continuing our journey in Revelation, and we will be looking at chapters 8 through 11. So I encourage you to read those before class, and we'll discuss. Have a blessed day.